Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Core Productions Deep Dive TV Podcast with my co-host Stacie here to talk about Under the Dome, Season 1, Episode 2, titled The Fire. The episode's description reads as follows. Following Duke's death, his house catches fire, forcing the town to rally together to form a bucket brigade. Elsewhere, Junior ambushes Barbie, while Dodie and Phil pick up a military frequency. The episode was written by Rick Cleveland, which is a name that stood out to me. I recognized it immediately. This was actually a co-producer on The West Wing and a writer of a few episodes, who got into some kind of dispute with Aaron Sorkin, the creator of the show, over a writing credit on one of the episodes. And they actually had a very public fight on a forum on a site that doesn't exist anymore called Television Without Pity. I think eventually he ended up leaving after one season of that show. But that name stood out to me right away. This was based on a book by Stephen King, and the episode was directed by Jack Bender, who I'm amazed that his name did not come up once in the last podcast. And it's kind of crazy because I figured we danced around it. We got really close to talking about him, but then we didn't bring him up. So yeah, we are pretty familiar with him. He's one of the executive producers on From. He also worked on Lost. He has way more power in From.
You're right. He's one of the showrunners of From,
exactly.
Basically.
Where he wasn't in either Lost or this show.
Right. He just acted as director. And in all three shows, he also creates the art that we see.
Right.
Mostly so in From. Of course, everybody who watches From, which I'm going to guess is most of the people who are listening to this.
I would assume so.
Are coming over from our From podcast. We've got Victor's drawings. We've got Victor's mother's paintings, which became evident in season 3. And I think we mentioned this last week without actually mentioning Jack Bender's
that's what I'm saying.
name.
We got close to mentioning him, but then didn't.
You know, how you can once you recognize Jack Bender's art style, you can clearly see that Miranda's paintings From are identical to the paintings that we're going to see in this series, Under the Dome. Which I don't think we see. I don't know if we see any in season 1. We spent a lot of time with them in season 2.
Right.
With the paintings that are done by a character that we aren't going to even meet until next season, I don't think.
No, I don't think we do.
But they were paintings that were done by Junior's mother in the past.
Yep.
And so I think some of them are visible if you're looking for them. When we go into Junior's house, you can see some of them, but I don't think we are brought to pay attention to them until later, if that makes sense. But if you're watching this show, season 1, keep your eyes out, because whenever we're in that house, I think there is some of those paintings visible on the wall. And again, if you're a From fan, you're going to instantly recognize and be like, wow, that looks exactly like Victor's drawings or Miranda's paintings.
Right.
And that's because, yes, they are done by Jack Bender. And he has a very distinct art style.
Yes. And
a couple of episodes of From has his artwork in it as well, but it's not, highlighted, of course, like it is in these two series.
All right, so before we go any further, I'll tell you a couple things. One, this is not a spoiler podcast, so if you haven't watched the episode, I highly recommend you go and check it out, and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening to one of the platforms of this podcast now available on, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Core Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're on our YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, and subscribe to our channel. All right, so Stacie, your thoughts on this week's episode?
One more thing about Jack Bender that I just wanted to mention is he has another show coming up this year.
The Institute.
Which
we do plan on covering.
Which is another Stephen King adaptation. So we've got Jack Bender, Stephen King, and it's being filmed in Nova Scotia, right near where From is filmed. So we're expecting to see some of those familiar faces, especially like the local Nova Scotian actors. Also including Robert Joy.
Oh, yeah.
Cast.
He's in the cast.
He's in the cast. So definitely we'll see him. And, of course, that's the actor who plays Victor's dad, Henry, in From. So we're looking forward to that series. We don't have a release date yet, but it's sometime this year. So that's why another reason we're back now talking about, Under the Dome, because we're getting all back into our Stephen King fuzzies, to get ready for a new series. And I'm super excited because Jack Bender is directing that one as well.
Yes,
so I know it's going to be great.
I know it's going to be pretty fantastic. I'm really looking forward to that one.
All right, so this episode, The Fire, another strong episode. 2 episodes into Under the Dome, and it still feels like this is going to be an awesome show. It feels very optimistic. I think we got great character growth. And the story's just progressing, and it's making sense, and yeah, it's a good episode. I liked it.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid episode. I do have one problem that's not like a big deal.
Okay.
But it's a problem that kind of goes throughout the entire series, particularly even season 1, which is pretty good, also has its problems. And my issue is that it has a tendency to throw away plot points, like the whole deal with the cop, like devolving into like the crazy person that he does. I think that really should have taken place over a couple episodes instead of just happening in this one episode. Like, I think they could have stretched that story out a little bit longer.
Sure.
And, done a little stronger job with that. Other than that, it's a pretty good episode. But that's not even a problem with this episode specifically. It's a problem with this series as a whole.
And, I definitely see what you're saying. But when I think about the fact that this is an adaptation of the book Under the Dome, and I think about what that book is, and I know you read it now as well.
Yeah.
That's what the book is. It's 1,100 pages of random stories about a whole bunch of different characters.
Right.
And all of their plot points come and go very quickly. Other than a couple through lines, mostly it's like, here's a character, here's something that happened to them, and now we're moving on to somebody else.
See, I get that. I do. At the same time, this is a television show.
Right.
And you have it, there's a reason why you have to make changes when you
Right.
go from book to like a television show or a movie. It's because what plays in the book doesn't necessarily play in either one of those mediums as well. So you do have to make changes, and not just like do random stuff. So I think it would have been more effective. And what Stephen King does in general is like slowly have the cop go mad. Be with him a little bit towards the beginning when he's not completely crazy, get to know him a little bit, and then show him devolve. And that's something that Stephen King does in his books and in his work in general. Maybe he didn't do it so much in this book specifically, but he does do that a lot. And I think it would have been more effective in this television show if they had stretched it out at least a couple episodes.
Yeah, well, also, I want to point out, and I'm not disagreeing with you,
right,
but playing devil's advocate a little bit,
okay,
is at this point, see, episode 2... this was planned to be a limited series.
That is also fair.
They meant this to be one season. And somewhere along the line, they changed it.
I'm kind of curious
They
as to when that
decided
happened.
they were going to have another season. And we know it wasn't after the season was finished because this season doesn't end in a place that would have ever made sense to end it.
No.
So somewhere during production, they made a change. And they changed how the season was going to end to lead it to a second season.
Right.
But I have to imagine that by episode 2, like, we were planning on, like, telling this whole story in 13 episodes.
Right. Yeah.
So, they didn't think they had time for development.
That
is
makes
basically
sense.
what I'm saying. If
No,
they
I
were
get
trying
you.
to squeeze that 1,100-page idea into a few episodes of television, something we recently have experience with, we covered Earth Abides.
Yes, we did.
And that's one of the biggest things that the audience complained about was, why are we rushing through everything? And that's because they had 6 episodes to tell the story.
Right.
It's basically a long movie, And if that's what Under the Dome was meant to be at the beginning of production, I think that might be the reason you see some of these stories going very quickly in the first handful of episodes, is because they were rushing.
Right. That makes sense. All right. So anything else to say before diving in?
I have a lot more information about one-off actors and uncredited actors this week.
Okay.
Because we don't have the main cast introduced, so I figured I'd dive a little deeper into the other people we see. So I will try and mention them as we meet them, but a lot of them I don't know where we meet them, so I'll probably just say a lot of it at the end.
All right. Sounds good. All right, so the episode begins. We have the flashback with Barbie. He's interrogating Peter Shumway. This happened way quicker than I thought it was going to happen. I didn't realize that when we're talking.
We revisited a couple times yet, still.
Yeah.
But yes, we got a lot of it right here.
He tells him that he has one day to get the money, but Peter has other ideas. He pulls out a gun. They get into a fight. Barbie's gun goes off, and Peter is dead. Barbie wakes up. Julia comes in asking if he's okay, because apparently he was screaming in his sleep. He's missing, he says he is, and he's missing his dog tags, which she has not seen. And she ends up saying goodnight.
Yeah, and she basically he thanks her again for letting him stay. And she's like, well, my husband's not here. I'm grateful not to be alone. I'm glad for the company.
Yeah, rubbing some salt into those wounds.
Right. And I love how they did this, that the flashback was a dream that Barbie was hearing.
Yeah.
Like, it makes it fit really seamlessly into the story they're telling. They're not bouncing around in time. They're fitting it into the narrative.
Yeah.
And I like that. I thought they did a good job of that.
So, meanwhile, Linda is cradling a dead Duke. 2 cops end up on the scene. This would be Paul and Freddie.
Yes, Freddie Denton, who we're going to learn a little bit later is Rusty's brother.
Right.
So this is Linda's future brother-in-law.
And already, Paul is showing cracks that he's going to crack under pressure. I'm not even sure how he got through basic training to ever become a cop, because
it's a small town.
He falls apart like that.
Yeah,
like,
he's you can tell things aren't going to go great with him. Freddie Denton is played by Joe Knezevic. He was in 4 episodes of Stargirl, 2 episodes of a show called Manhunt. And Officer Paul Randolph is played by Kevin Sizemore. We talked about him last week. He was uncredited last week, so we already talked about his credits.
So, they realize the dome affects electronics. She sends Paul, the hostile one, off to do his job. The other stays behind to attend to Duke.
Yeah, and Paul's at first he's basically like, who put you in charge, right? He's like, if Duke's dead, who's in charge? Should I be listening to you?
Right.
And she's like, you're a cop. Like, go do your job and, help people not die.
Right, yeah. So, Joe, we see Joe leaving his house, and Ben tells him about his basically his...
They're talking about the seizure.
Right, seizure.
They're reminding us that Joe had a seizure.
In my notes, I have written here surgery for some reason.
That's the wrong word.
No, yeah. So, people were trying to dig underneath, but no luck. Ben brings up their trig test, that they're not going to have to take it, and Joe takes that and basically gets an idea to map the dome and potentially find holes. Bill and Dodie are at the radio station. She's trying to do some tech stuff. They hear they are under a dome again. Dodie doesn't want to announce that till they know more, and then Bill ends up getting on and broadcasting. Big Jim, meanwhile, gets Rose's power to work, and he doesn't charge her.
He fixes her generator.
Yes. Alice and Caroline come downstairs thinking the dome might have gone away, but not so much.
Yeah, so they're staying at the Sweetbriar, in, I guess, a guest room that Rose has, because she lives upstairs from the diner.
They end up talking to Jim, who calls this place the place to be if they're going to get stuck somewhere. Linda comes in and tells Jim that Duke is dead.
Yeah, it was very funny timing, right?
Right.
Because Jim's like, if you're going to be somewhere, this is the best place to ever be. And then enter the police officer covered in blood and is like, the sheriff's dead.
That is pretty funny. I want to watch it again because I didn't really notice that.
You didn't catch that order of events.
No. So Julia is trying to get the military's attention, but they basically pay no attention to her. Barbie comes out and says they are probably under orders not to talk to them, and he says she could strip naked and it wouldn't work, or he says that. And she says she tried that an hour ago. And Barbie smiles at that, but is she joking? Or...
I think she's joking,
okay.
But I think he liked the notion.
Right, yeah. I don't know. Is she, though? Maybe she did.
Maybe she did.
So Julia still hasn't found his dog tags. She thinks the government might be behind this, and she realizes they are talking to someone. She sees them talking on someone on the radio. So she gets in the car and drives to the radio station. And my note here is, I guess Barbie isn't invited to this, because there's no reason why he's just kind of left standing there. You could easily go with her.
Yeah, he's got his own story to
right,
do.
Of course. So Angie tears apart the shelter that she's locked in and tries to escape, but that attempt fails. As Junior comes in, she attacks him, but she basically gets to the top of the stairs, but he's locked that door.
He's a little smarter than he looks.
Yes. He looks kind of dumb.
He locked the door behind him, so he's got the key. So even though she physically got away from him, she's still locked in.
Yeah, so he's an irredeemable asshole, but he's not a dumb one.
Exactly. And as a result of this, she's now going to get chained to the bed.
Right.
And I found it very convenient that there's a chain just at the ready to make into a shackle.
Maybe he brought it with him.
No, but it was already hooked on one end to the bed.
Right.
And he's like, let me hook this to your leg. What have they been doing in this shelter previously?
I don't know.
There's just a chain.
You know what?
Here.
I don't want to know, okay? I don't want to know what Jim or Junior were up to in there. He wants her to get back to being the Angie he knew before yesterday and won't take no for an answer. He says that she's sick and he's going to make her feel better. He won't take her to the hospital, however, because Barbie might be there.
And she doesn't even know, like, what the heck he's talking about. Like, who?
Right. And he's unconvinced that nothing happened there. He says when the dome comes down, she will love him again. And she begs to dip her and decides to screw with him by saying she slept with Barbie, and he leaves without comment as she screams after him. Credits. All right, I want you guys to remember as you go along in this series, these scenes here where he's trapping a woman against her will in a basement or the fallout shelter. Uh-huh. This makes him an irredeemable jackass.
But he's doing it because he thinks she's sick.
Right.
So in his head, he's not evil. He has a reason. He has a motive.
Yes.
He is mentally ill, is what I'm trying to say.
He is delusional, for sure. But, we're going to get back to this, for sure. When we get into season 2, I'm going to go on this diatribe against what...
Because we forgive him.
Exactly.
Angie forgives him. Everybody forgives him.
Right, exactly.
And pretends this didn't happen. Right.
That is my big problem.
Yeah.
And okay, so... All right, so I guess I'll get into some of this now. Remember, This Is Us.
Yeah.
Kate and her ex-boyfriend at the time.
Yeah, the abusive one.
Yes, the abusive one. She went to go visit him in the current day.
Right.
I had some major problems with that because I was against the messaging of that. And, Kate, the actress who played her, Chrissy Metz, was all like, girl power. This is empowering. And I understand where she was coming from. I just respectfully disagreed. In the sense that I don't think it's a good idea to put out the message that it's a good idea to go to someone who previously abused you.
Right.
You need to stay away from those type of people. My problem with that is you need to be very careful with your messaging. And this is, if you're going to tackle scenes like this and show a relationship like this, you have to make it very clear that this is not good, that this is not okay. Right. This is not forgivable.
Yeah. At least they don't end up together.
Fair.
Because that would have been a lot worse.
Right. And it comes up to the line of being irresponsible in its messaging. That's my biggest problem. And I'll elaborate on that as we get to those scenes in the future. But that's basically where I'm coming from there. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to tackle talking about this series, is to talk about that specific issue. Mm-hmm. And then, we ended up doing more than that. But yeah. So anyway, getting back to this, I lost my place.
So we got to the opening credits.
Oh, yes.
We're about a third of the way through the episode at this point, right. When we get our opening credits.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty long, cold open.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, remember we forgot to tell you who's in this series. So
right.
Let's throw some names on the screen now.
So when we come back, Jim reacts in shock to Duke's body. Linda says that he was basically like a father. She tells him about Duke's warning that she was about to give him, and Jim claims basically that he has no idea what that could have been about. Reverend Coggins comes in. He's AKA called Lester.
Yeah, Lester Coggins. He's the local reverend and the Undertaker, apparently.
Which is kind of weird.
Again, small town.
Yeah, this is the first time that we are seeing him. He's complaining about dealing with more dead bodies, and basically Jim is like, show some respect. This is Duke. This isn't just some random person that died.
Right, Lester wasn't getting it at first, and he's like, Duke is dead, which we'll quickly learn, it's the three of them that were in on this big propane secret that we don't know much about yet.
Right. And by the way, Lester's played by Ned Bellamy, 127 credits for him, including Father Stu with Mark Wahlberg, an episode of Gotham, and 3 episodes of Justified.
He's also in 3 episodes of Resurrection. Do you remember that show with Omar Epps?
I heard of it. I never actually watched it. Yeah.
He was in Saw.
Uh-huh.
And he was in recently a movie called Family Switch.
Okay.
It was like a whole family version of Freaky Friday.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's a fun one.
All right. So after Linda leaves, Jim violently attacks Lester. He's mad at him for using the drugs that they are making, so it's pretty clear that the propane has something to do with drugs. Lester says now they don't have to worry about Duke talking, and Jim sarcastically calls him a real man of God.
So Jim basically in this conversation shows maybe he's not as bad of a guy as he is.
So
he's like, the only reason I got involved in this was to help the town.
right.
Which we know that was Duke's stance.
Mm-hmm.
But in this scene, Jim is really acting like he had noble intentions as well. He just wanted to raise money for the town. He's not, he's not a drug addict himself.
I think Jim actually does have noble intentions. He's just hopelessly misguided.
Yeah.
And he has a messiah complex.
He's very narcissistic.
Yes.
And I think the more this story goes on, the more he gets hungry for power and wants to just be in charge more than anything.
You see actually a moment here where he gets asked who's in charge, and he hesitates. He doesn't act like, oh, I'm in charge.
Right. I don't think he's realized it yet.
Yeah,
that there isn't anybody in charge.
Right.
And he wants to be that person.
Right. So, I mean, there's some humanity in this guy. He's
very rough around the edges.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those cases where you don't really know somebody, including like yourself, and how you're going to act in a unusual situation until you're there.
And that's kind of a funny thing because that's a theme that Stephen King often plays with.
Yeah.
It's like,
people suck.
Yeah. Basically. Like, under certain circumstances, even the best of people are going to turn evil.
Right.
And,
it's like you don't know what you're capable of doing
right.
until you face a situation where you have to make those kind of decisions.
Right. And Dean Norris, by the way, is an expert at playing this type of character. I think, he's really great at finding the humanity, even in the worst type of people.
Now, meanwhile, Lester, I don't think that we have any reason to think that he's a great guy ever.
No, he's also an idiot.
He's pretty dumb.
Yes,
we'll see that throughout this episode.
Yep.
And he's also just very, kind of sleazy. Like, yeah, I'm doing drugs. Yeah, I don't give a crap about these bodies here. He's just kind of like, he's not a good preacher, that's for sure.
No.
Jim is not wrong for calling him out on that.
No.
He's just kind of a bad guy. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily bad guy, but a crappy guy, I think, is what we can believe about him.
So, anyway, back with Joe and Ben. Ben draws a door and says, hey, I found the way out. And Joe laughs and calls him an idiot. Barbie happens upon Joe and tells him to keep, basically looks at what Joe has been up to and says, keep up the good work.
Yeah, Joe thinks he's going to tell him to stop, but he's like, this is great, keep going.
And as he leaves, Joe says he's definitely not from around here. And when Ben asks why, and Joe says it's because he's cool.
Yeah,
and
he's cool.
We definitely see some hero worship thing going on here, which will be something that we will see for the rest of the series.
And the information Joe was able to give Barbie that he's learned so far is that it's roughly a circle, and it's about 10 miles across. So that's how big of an area we're dealing with here.
Phil and Dodie, meanwhile, monitor communications when Julia enters. And we cut away from that. Linda enters the station and hears some noises. She draws her gun, and she happens upon Jim, who claims to be there looking for Duke's will, which he pulls out. And Linda apparently was left everything, which she says very emotionally. And Jim says, of course he did. He treated you like a daughter, or like basically...
The daughter you never had.
Yeah, the daughter you never had. And,
so she's got everything, including his house.
Jim leaves, and apparently that's not why he was there. He was there to look, searching for files about the secret
so apparently they're looking for the records that Duke kept about their secret drug operation.
And basically Lester is there, and Jim says that he's going to go take care of the situation, and Lester is left to his own devices, which we were going to see how big of a mistake that actually is.
He tells Lester to go to Duke's house to search for records there.
Right.
Before Linda goes there, because now it's her house. She's probably going to go there sometime soon. They don't want Linda finding the records.
Well, at least Lester follows directions.
So yes, he's followed directions as far as go to the house. Maybe Jim should have been more specific about what he should do once he finds the records.
Right, yes. So Julia, meanwhile, marvels at Dodie's technical skills.
That's exactly what I wrote. Julia marvels.
She learns that this is a dome and decides people need to know this.
Yeah, she's instantly like, why haven't you told anybody? So we learn Julia is a woman of action. The second she learns, she goes and takes the mic from Phil and she makes an announcement. She doesn't stop and think about it. She just does it.
It makes sense because she is a reporter.
She's a journalist.
So that's kind of her job.
It's her natural instinct, right, is to spread news to people.
Right.
But she doesn't stop and think, like, is this the right move?
Right.
Is this going to cause panic? Because sometimes you do need to withhold news for the right moment, you know?
Yes. Let's see. In Men in Black, the movie, there's a quote where the Tommy Lee Jones character says, a person is smart. People are dumb, panicky animals. And that's very much true. So we cut to, the scene where basically everybody's reacting to this news. And Nori tells her mom that this means they're all going to die here.
Yeah, so we cut to the, this is the diner.
Right, Rose's place.
Everyone, Rose, Briarwood Rose?
Something like that.
The Briar Rose.
Yeah.
I don't know why all of a sudden I don't know how to say it. Everyone here is just kind of talking like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? Including the characters of customer number 1 and customer number 2. Customer 1 is played by Maureen Mountcastle. She's in 1 episode of One Tree Hill, 1 episode of Dead Silent. Customer number 2 is played by Zico Zaki.
Oh.
That sounds like a fun name.
It does.
He is in 2 episodes of Satisfactions, 8 episodes of 6, 7 episodes of 24 Legacy. A lot of numbers there.
Wow. I'm surprised that you got through that without stumbling.
I did.
Yeah.
And we have an uncredited listing in this scene for Diner Patron, played by Jonathan Edwards. He was in 6 episodes of Revolution and an episode of Sleepy Hollow.
So, Nori's pretty melodramatic here.
Right.
Like, she just jumps to the conclusion that they're going to die there. That there's no hope.
Yeah, so she's a very pessimistic, she's a teen.
Yeah,
She has a, we talked about there being, like, some roundness to the characters in this series. She's not very round. She's, she is this sullen,
teenager.
always dramatic, always, like, worst case scenario, always sarcastic. She has a very clear personality of who Nori is.
Right. All right, so the townspeople are asking questions. Linda is trying to keep them calm, but one of the 2 cops, Paul
Randolph,
is freaking out and not handling it.
Also exactly what my notes say.
Right.
We're pretty on tune with this.
So Linda asks if they will ever... Oh, yeah, so he ends up leaving. Linda asks Freddie if he thinks that they will ever see Rusty again. He tells her that he was planning on taking her to Hawaii.
So this is where we learned that Freddie is Rusty's brother.
Right.
And she says she wants to know if they'll ever see him again, and I'm going to tell you yes in episode 5, Linda. Okay?
Right, yeah.
So you just hang on a little longer, you're going to see Rusty again.
And then you're never going to see him again. But after that, yeah. That's not what Rusty told her. Lester happens upon them, and I think this is where he lifts the keys.
He pickpockets Linda's keys in order to get access to
So,
Duke's house.
I'm going to say this for the first time, but not for the last time. Linda is not a very good cop.
I mean, she's a little naive.
Right,
She sees the best in people. She's young.
Yeah.
And she's, it's a small town. Like she probably doesn't have to do a lot in her job, to be honest, before this. Like, she's just, she was always just kind of under Duke's wing, and he handled things, and she sees the world through rose-colored glasses.
And yet, at times I find myself shouting at the screen, Linda, you are so stupid. But yeah, she's a nice person, but I don't think she's necessarily fit for this particular role.
Well, I think they agreed with you.
Yeah, I guess so. So, Joe and Ben walk along the dome.
You skipped one scene. I'm going to bring it up because we meet somebody.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so Jim happens upon a person trying to get out with a plow. Yeah, he's trying to dig underneath.
His plan is to dig underneath the dome. He's in some kind of farm equipment.
Right, it's a plow of some type.
But Jim stops him.
Right.
Jim's being a good guy in this moment.
Right.
Because that machine has a battery in it, and from what we learn now, that battery's going to fry him.
Right.
This character is titled Farmer. He doesn't have a name. Farmer is played by David M. Smith. And he was the assistant art director on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Interesting.
And he played a zebra on that show.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got a Mr. Rogers connection.
And I remember this playing out in the book.
Okay, yeah.
So, but it actually happened. Like, somebody did get fried trying to dig under the dome with some equipment. I think it was, and I think that's why I got confused when I was doing these credits, because I was like, this actor's not, we don't see him again. This is a one-off role. And he's just credited as farmer. But I'm like, isn't that the guy that like is going to play a bigger role later? Like I don't know if you remember who I'm talking about. I don't remember his name, but there's a farmer who plays a bigger role.
It's not the same guy.
It's not the same guy. But I think that's the guy in the book. It was either him or his son. Like one of that.
Okay.
Somebody from like that family was a big deal in the book. He had like 3 sons. And one of them is the one who fried himself trying to dig under the dome.
Gotcha. Okay.
In the book.
Okay.
So I think that's where my brain was like, isn't this guy come back? Don't I know him? But no, it's a different character in the show.
Yeah, the character you're talking about, we're actually going to meet in the next episode.
Oh, and it's already?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it was later.
Yeah, I mean, that storyline that you're talking about doesn't happen yet, but we do actually see him for the first time next episode.
Okay.
So Jim stops and tells him about Duke, what happened to him, and the person asks Jim, who's in charge, and this is that moment where he's like, oh, I hadn't even really thought about that.
Yeah,
he
hesitates. I guess I'm going to be in charge.
Right. But
it's not going to be Linda.
But it doesn't seem like he's like jumping at the chance to have more power.
No, he's contemplating it.
Right. So Joe and Ben walk along the dome. Ben laments that he will never get out and that he will never be able to make out with Mila Kunis. And Joe correctly points out the dome was not the only thing preventing that from happening. They see the military spraying the wall, doing experiments, and Joe realizes that some of the water is getting through, which, by the way, is an obvious but important point. Because if the dome were not semi-permeable and nothing can get through, that means that they would have so much oxygen and eventually they would all suffocate.
Right, which is something they were, the townspeople were talking about. Like, are we going to run out of air?
Right, yeah.
Are we going to, this shows they can get rain.
Right.
They're not going to get full power rain, but like water can get through, moisture can get through, air can get through.
Right.
It is, like you said, semi-permeable, and that's what the military is doing on the outside is they're testing that. It's funny because they are apparently under such hush orders not to communicate with anybody inside. You think they would have wanted to communicate with the kids?
Right.
You think they would have wanted somebody on the inside to help them test this and to show them, like, yes, the water's getting through and to help figure out at what rate it's getting through. But they continue to ignore them and pretend like they can't even see them.
Right.
And I just think that's so ridiculous and unrealistic that they wouldn't communicate at all when it's literally affecting the experiment they're trying to do. Yeah,
at the same time, like, what was I going to say? A point that I made about From that show is that you're trapped in this scenario. Whatever's trapping them there is going to want to sustain them. It's not going to want them all to die.
Right.
So it's going to give them the means to survive. So if the dome was created to trap them there, but it also wants to keep them alive.
Yeah, but they don't know that yet.
Of course. But that's why, of course, like, it's made in such a way that something can get through.
Right.
Such as water and presumably oxygen.
Right.
So that they don't all suffocate. It doesn't want them all to die.
Right. But as far as they know, like, this could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
This could just be, like, some, weapon that another country built to try and kill people.
Fair enough.
It could be trying to kill them.
Right.
Like, they don't know.
So, we see Barbie going to the convenience store to buy some cigarettes, and he ends up seeing Nori basically sneaking a candy bar and not paying for it. So he's basically noticing her shoplifting. He does not rat her out, which I find interesting. He's basically asked by Nori why he's buying cigarettes. It seems to be hazardous to his health, and he says, it's not for me. It's basically an investment. And this is actually kind of funny because this is something that will later come up. Like, he will be involved in the storyline where somebody is making investments in things for future use.
But you know what my thought is doesn't he smoke? We've already seen him smoking. He
does.
He gave Angie a cigarette, so why aren't these for him?
Right.
Did he quit smoking between last week and now?
I doubt
I don't
it.
feel like we ever see him smoking again.
No, maybe he decided to quit.
He realized it's too big of a commodity to waste on himself.
Right, yeah, perhaps.
But it's just funny that, like, they introduced the fact that he does smoke.
Yeah, that was an important plot point. How Junior happened to notice that he was even talking to Angie in the first place.
Right.
Speaking of Junior, he's in the process of stalking him.
Yeah, so he's watching him and following him. In this convenience store scene, the cashier, she's played by Anna Sharma. And she only has one other credit. It's one episode of Devious Maids.
Dodie, Phil, and Julia try to get into the communications again, and eventually Julia realizes the military doesn't know what this thing is either, so they're not the
because
cause.
they're like, oh, we don't know what it's made out of.
Right.
And she's like, if they built it, they wouldn't be questioning the things they're questioning.
Right.
So if they didn't make it, who did?
Right. So Barbie goes to the cabin he killed Peter in and finds Peter's gun unloaded, as well as his dog tags, which are still there.
Yeah, that's what he went here for, is to find his dog tags, because you don't want those at the, scene of a murder.
This is kind of a subtle point, but something that is important.
Right.
Basically, Peter threatened
Barbie
with an empty gun.
Right. Now, what we'll soon learn, and again, we come back to this a few times, is, Peter was using Barbie for assisted unaliving.
Right.
Right. But in this moment, I don't think Barbie realizes that quite yet.
No.
I think he feels more guilty now.
Right.
From the fact that he was never really in danger.
Right. No.
Because the gun wasn't loaded.
Of course, he would have absolutely no way of knowing that.
He'd have no way of knowing that, but I'm sure this makes him feel even worse.
Right. So Junior has come in to the incorrect impression that this is where Angie and him screwed.
Right. And Barbie's like, who? I have no idea who that is.
And Junior says, oh, I guess she put up a struggle. Like, so what are you suggesting here? Are you suggesting, because, so he thinks that Barbie forced this encounter, because previously it seemed like he thinks that Angie and Barbie were doing this consensually, and now he's suggesting that Barbie forced himself on
remember, he's
Angie.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to have
it's not a
thought that makes sense from one thought to the next.
All right, fine.
Maybe he thinks that, the dome is the whole reason any of it happened.
Right. So Junior says that she belongs to him, and Barbie says, well, that's too bad for her. And then they get into a pretty big fight.
Total physical altercation. They end up rolling down a hill.
And then he tells Junior to stay away from him, or next time he won't stop.
Yeah, so basically Barbie beats the crap out of Junior.
Right.
There's a clear winner in this struggle.
Yes. And Junior looks pretty bloody.
And us knowing, like, hey, this is a scene where he, like, killed somebody, you gotta think, like, yeah, Barbie's the clear victor here.
Yeah.
And
he
Junior doesn't have a chance of winning anything that he's trying to start.
Right. Barbie could very easily kill Junior at this point.
Now, in the book, this altercation took place prior to the events of the book starting. We start the book where there's already a history of Barbie having beat the crap out of Junior.
Right.
And I don't know if this is ever stated in the series. It hasn't been said yet, so I don't know if it does. But in the book, it's very specifically said that Junior thinks that Barbie's responsible for the dome.
Okay.
Like, that's one of his crazy thoughts, is that Barbie somehow has something to do with the dome coming down.
Right.
Again, to the idea of he is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and none of his thoughts are very lucid at all.
Right. So that's actually pretty consistent with the book then.
Yeah.
Except that he's not quite as...
He's not, a serial killer.
Right. So Lester goes to Duke's house to burn incriminating files and accidentally sets the house ablaze with him trapped in it. Okay, so what's exactly on those curtains? Is there lighter fluid on them? Because they just go straight up into flames.
Okay, so yeah, he finds the records. Yeah. He takes a cigar. Mm-hmm. And then he just lights a match, torches the documents, very haphazardly drops them into a waste can, kicks the can without paying any attention to it, and it sets the curtains on fire. And then he's like, oh, wait, I started a fire.
Right.
What did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, no, he's really stupid, but those curtains go up way too quickly.
They're probably really old.
Maybe.
Before they had, fire retardant fabrics.
Okay. All right. So, Joe and Ben happen upon a dog whose owner was obviously killed by the dome, but the body is nowhere to be seen. It was dragged off.
Half the body can be seen on the other side of the dome.
Oh, was it?
He was cut in half.
Okay, I thought the body was, taken away.
Their side of the body is missing.
Right.
And they decide it must have been dragged away by an animal.
Gotcha.
It's kind of gruesome if you actually, see what's there.
Right. I'm glad I didn't
kind
see that in too much detail.
Yeah.
So Joe discovers that the dog's name is Truman, and then Joe sees a fire and brings a dog that he's basically adopting.
He's adopting this dog. Yeah.
Right.
Truman's going to become a character.
Yes.
At least for this season. I think he kind of disappears eventually.
I think so. I don't
There's
quite remember.
another dog later, but it's not Truman. I think we forget Truman exists at some point.
The other dog belongs to to Big Jim, basically. And I think that's
he adopts him.
Right. That's
out of nowhere.
That's in the final season.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Linda sees her other partner that he shows. Okay, so she's driving with Freddie.
Yeah, Linda and Freddie come across Paul.
Who's driving like a maniac.
Paul is, like, blocking the road.
Right. He gets out of the car with loaded gun.
The whole trunk is full of firearms.
Yeah. He's acting unhinged. And then he points a gun at Barbie, who's there for...
He's walking back to Julia's or wherever he's headed.
Right.
From the cabin where he killed Peter.
So, mind you...
He's just walking in the woods.
And then Paul is just
on the side of the road.
Yeah. And Paul's just pointing a gun at him for no reason.
Yeah, he's like, who are you?
Right.
And Linda's like, wait, like that's... She describes him as the guy who saved the McAllister kid.
Right. Yeah. So, Paul, just so you know, you're not going to make a lot of friends if you happen upon just, anybody and just point a gun at them instantly. For no reason at all.
Right.
There's no evidence here that Barbie is a threat at all.
Right.
So
he's lost it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's without, saying it specifically, maybe they're kind of giving him that whole thing from Junior that I was just saying that, well, maybe he thinks Barbie is the reason for it. You know, maybe he's blaming this random stranger for something.
Right. So Linda gets a call about the fire, and, Paul is resisting any kind of orders from her, but then he says, like, do it now. And this is the last time that Paul is going to listen to Linda. During the course of this episode and for the series.
Right. And the radio call comes from Jackie. She's the police dispatcher.
Okay.
And there's no credit for her. And I don't know if we ever meet her. We definitely don't meet her in this episode. And she doesn't have a credit in this episode. But she has a much bigger role in the book. Right. She's like one of, those characters we keep following in the books. Mm-hmm. And again, I like that they mention her and give her the same name, even if we're not going to, cling on to her as a character.
Gotcha.
It's like some continuity, between the book and the series. But you don't know it's there unless you're looking for it.
Right. So Barbie, by the way, ends up going with Linda along for the ride.
Yeah, well, Linda takes him. He's like, warm body in the car. Like, all hands on deck, let's go. Right. He doesn't really have a choice in the matter. Yeah,
I mean, in this situation, a fire of any kind is a big deal.
Exactly. Because, remember, all of the fire trucks and the firefighters are not here. Mm-hmm. They were at the parade. Right. There is no fire department coming to put out the fire. And they don't know what's going to happen if this fire spreads.
Mm-hmm. So Jim gets a call about the fire, too. He's listening to the same dispatcher. And arrives on the scene before anyone else. He realizes that Lester isn't there. I'm pretty sure he hears him in there.
He hears him.
He has absolutely no intention of helping him out.
Right. He doesn't tell them that Coggins is inside. He's like, I just got here. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. And at this point, he's just trying to cover his own ass because he doesn't want them to discover the documents that Lester's hiding or the fact that he's the one who sent him there. Right. Or to think he has anything to do with the fire.
Mm-hmm. So Barbie is basically calling the shots. Julia arrives to take pictures. She tells Barbie that the buildings that are on fire could take Chester Mills out because there's no fire trucks. It hasn't rained in weeks.
Yeah, everything's very dry and flammable.
This is a very bad situation. So, and by the way, at this point, they don't know that this is semi-permeable. Right. So smoke is also a serious situation if you don't know that it's going to go through the dome. Right. So Linda realizes someone is inside, realizes that Lester's in there, goes to rescue him. Jim doesn't want that to happen, but she goes in there and gets Lester out of the fire.
And then Jim just kind of drives off. Right. We'll soon learn what he's doing, but it just kind of looks like he's out of here. Right.
Yeah, screw you guys. I got better things to do.
In reality, he has a plan, which is going to actually be helpful.
So the house ends up blowing up because of the propane tank, and the town is desperately trying to put the fire out from a pool of water with buckets.
Yeah, so the whole town basically is here, including Nori and her family, who make some comment like, wow, our neighbors back in California never would have helped each other like this. Right. Like, look at this community. Yeah. And they've got buckets and hoses, and they're doing everything they can to try and help fight this fire, but it's not going great. Right. They're losing.
Right. Eventually, Jim arrives back with a bulldozer, the same one that we saw him stop the farmer from riding into the dome and just plows the entire house down.
Yeah, in turn, stopping the spread of the fire so they can put it out. And it's really funny because in my memory, I remembered him knocking down the pool. Like, that's what I thought was about to happen. He knocks down the pool, and then the water flows and puts out the fire.
No.
And that's not what happened, but that's what happened in my head. So I don't know where that came from.
I mean, it makes sense, but that's not what happened.
It's not what happened.
No.
Also, during this scene is when Joe and Nori first meet.
Oh.
Important little moment for them.
Meet cute.
And earlier, right before, Joe and Ben came upon the guys testing the water, they were commiserating about how, we're never going to meet another girl again. Every girl we're ever going to meet, we've already met, and that was so sad.
Yes.
And then he meets a new girl.
Yes, but Ben still doesn't get to make out with Mila Kunis.
No.
Mm-hmm. So, eventually... Oh, yeah, okay, I read that. So, okay. Angie, meanwhile, is still trying to escape. When Junior comes back, he tells him that he killed Barbie. Angie doesn't believe him, saying that even he wouldn't do such a thing.
Yeah, she again quotes, "I've known you since the 3rd grade. You're not just going to murder somebody."
And Junior's like, "Oh, that's my Angie. You're back." Because she thinks that you're not going to go and kill somebody. That's what you think is evidence in your favor?
Should she believe because she's literally been kidnapped by him.
Right.
Maybe she should think he's capable of evil at this point.
Well, I mean, she doesn't necessarily want to say that. But, I mean, at the same time, what she says is not a compliment. Even you wouldn't do something like that. That is not something you say to someone when you're trying to compliment them.
But I think he likes the fact that she didn't believe that he's a killer.
Oh, you're not a cold-blooded killer. That's a point in my favor.
Because, he could have been if they followed the book a little closer.
Yeah, he could have been.
But yeah, I felt like she should have believed him a little bit more, or at least questioned, like maybe did she just get this dude killed that she doesn't even know by lying and, telling Junior lies.
Right.
But she doesn't even believe it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have liked it more if she took a minute to ponder what she may have just done.
Fair enough. Yeah, because if Junior had done that, then she would have been responsible for that because she's the one that egged him on.
Right.
She's the one who started lying and basically to piss him off.
Yeah. And, eventually she'll get to the point where she knows how to manipulate him, but I really feel like she should have figured that out quicker.
Right.
And in this episode, instead of being like, I'm never going to love you and I did screw that guy, like maybe she should have picked up on the fact that he's continually saying, as soon as, you're better and you love me, I'm going to let you go. You think she'd have, used that to her advantage to get the frick out of the situation. You would think, but she's hot-headed. Yeah. She got pissed off, and so she decided to do something to hurt him instead of, playing it smart. Right. So he brought her some pictures and says, this is what they're looking for, and it's pictures of them that they took in some kind of photo booth photos. Yeah. And he's like, this is what we're working towards. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that's what's going to help lead her to that idea to kind of play along. Mm. So Julia realizes that Barbie has found his name tags. He lies about where he found them. He says, oh, yeah, they were hanging on the mirror. The bathroom mirror. And she's like, that's the first place I checked. And you're like, huh, that's interesting. And she doesn't in any way think this is suspicious. Yeah, but also, why didn't he stick to the story he told her earlier? I must have left him in the car. Yeah. Why did he say, I found him somewhere where they weren't in your house? Right. Where you were looking for them? Yeah. So it's kind of not... They're both a little stupid in this conversation. Yeah. So Jim talks to Lester, who's going to live. So Lester, the EMT's there. He says that he got lucky. Linda found him when he did. The EMT's played by Troy Rudisill. He was in 3 episodes of One Tree Hill, 1 episode of The Outsider, which is another Stephen King, Jack Bender project. Was Jack Bender on that one? I think he might have been. I think he might have been. Actually, he was. I think so. I would absolutely love to cover that series. I haven't seen that series. It's on HBO. Right. I have the book. I haven't read it yet. Yeah. It's a great series, too. Both the book and the series on it are great. I would highly recommend it. I'll get to it eventually. And then we can cover it. Yeah. And Troy was also in the movie Halloween Kills. And this is his only appearance on the series. So Lester says he was... basically Jim is pissed at him, and Lester says he was cleaning up the mess, as, he was told to do. Linda asks,
comes over and asks, what were you doing in there?
And
Lester actually comes up with a good
right,
lie.
Lester isn't stupid in this moment.
Right.
He covers his tracks beautifully. He says something that makes perfect sense. He's like, I was there getting an outfit to bury Duke in.
Right.
Which makes perfect sense that he would be the one to do that.
Right.
So Linda's not questioning it.
Right.
And Jim...
She still doesn't have very good instincts.
Jim picks up, the next question, which Linda doesn't ask.
Right.
But Jim anticipates, well, how did the fire start? And he's like, oh, there must have been a gas leak because the dome's right in his backyard. It must have, caused a gas leak, and that's why we have a fire.
So Jim ends up giving a big speech about the town coming together. But Paul isn't having it. He says, you're lying to these people. It's not going to be okay. We're all going to die, is basically what he's doing here. Now, I get the guy's unstable. At the same time, I don't understand how this guy ever became a cop. Like, what? I guess, what does he want Jim to say? Oh, we're all going to die. We should.
He's lost it, and he can't handle it. And, they probably should have realized this earlier and maybe, taken those guns away from him, taken the badge away from him.
Maybe.
He was showing signs of being off the rocker.
Yeah. Definitely, right from the start in this episode. Right from frame 1. So, he says that the smoke had to have gone somewhere. Again, this goes back to the whole point of, not knowing that this dome is semi-permeable.
And this would have been a great time for
Joe to
step up and tell them what he learned.
Right.
But, of course, he's kind of a coward and doesn't step up ever.
He's a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
What do you... And I would say that I wouldn't be too much different in this situation either.
But he should have told somebody by now.
Right.
You know who he should have told is the character we don't meet until season 2. That's who he should have told.
The scientist.
His science teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Who he is close with.
Right.
That's exactly who he should be working with on all these scientific details.
Yep, absolutely. But, of course, we're not going to see her, in this season, which is a big problem. For season 2. It doesn't really affect season 1 that much. It's a season 2 problem. But, yeah.
But, yeah, where is she during this?
Right, exactly. So, yeah, we'll definitely be bringing that up again. So, so he's basically... Paul. He takes a gun, points it upwards, and fires at the dome, which is the dumbest thing that he could possibly do.
Yeah, but he didn't think it through. He wasn't trying to make anything bad happen.
Right.
He was just shooting at the dome.
Right.
Without thinking, what's going to happen when you shoot at the dome?
Well, now we know.
It
ricochets off the dome, kills Freddy, and he dies.
Yeah, right.
And meanwhile, Barbie uses his fancy-dancy military skills and disables Paul. And that is pretty much where the episode ends.
That's where the episode ends. So we met and lost Officer Freddie Denton, Rusty's brother, who I think he did have a bigger part in the book. I do feel like he died, and I kind of feel like it was Paul that killed him in the book, too.
Probably.
But I feel like it was more gruesome and direct and purposeful. And I feel like somebody else died from a ricocheted bullet, but not the cops.
Right.
Again, there's so much mirroring, and it's hard for me to talk about because it's been over a year since I read the book, so I don't remember all the details. But there's so many little details that you appreciate. Like, yeah, that did come from the book, but, they're changing them. Because believe it or not, the 20 characters we have in this show is tiny compared to the number of characters in the book.
Right. So, Freddy's done.
Freddy is gone.
Paul
is finally apprehended.
Yes.
But that's not going to last for long.
Nope.
He's going to continue to be a problem. Is it all next week or 2 episodes still, I think? Something like that.
I'm pretty sure it's the next episode. The next episode is titled Manhunt.
Does that finish it?
I think so.
I think it's still 2 episodes. His story goes on.
Okay, maybe. Possibly.
I'm not sure, though. Again, it's been a minute.
Either way, when we get to a certain scene, it's going to be another demonstration about how Linda is a terrible cop.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So let's see. We covered all the one-off actors for this episode. We have a bunch of uncredited listings, though, and I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you the people from the IMDb credits for this episode. And I use the word credit lightly because these are uncredited listings, which is always complicated to talk about. But I did notice, if you check out the Under the Dome wiki on Fandom, the fandom.com wiki for Under the Dome. It's super detailed. It's got a lot of great information, including different background performers than what we're seeing on IMDb. Some of them, are crossed over. And it's not more background actors, but it's different ones. Because obviously, there's a ton of background in this series, right? Because we've got, big crowd scenes all the time. So if you want to know more than what I'm providing, definitely check out the fandom wiki for Under the Dome, because it's got a lot of great information. But I stuck to the IMDb people, because otherwise this would get super insane.
Right.
Trying to pull up all the information from everywhere. So we have a Chester's Mill resident who last week was also uncredited, but listed as diner patron. This week he's Chester Mill's resident. We're going to see him again in episodes 5 and 10, and the actor is Steve Baldwin. And I didn't tell you his credits last week, but he was in 1 episode of Secrets and Lies, 2 episodes of Sleepy Hollow, so we're going to see him a couple more times. And then we have David Pascoe again. We talked about him last week. We have an actor named Will Smith, but not that Will Smith, Will with 1 L.
Gotcha.
He is in this episode plus the next 11, 12 total episodes.
So this season, basically.
Yes, we see him in every episode this season except last week, but uncredited. So he's a resident that we're going to see, and it's great that they're doing that. That they have a lot of background actors who they did keep, and that we see over and over again, and that's really great because you expect to see the same people. We're isolated under a dome.
Yeah, if you're seeing new people every week, that's a problem. Specifically in this series.
It's the same type of problem we see in From,
yes,
where we do have some recurring background, but also they keep bringing new ones in.
Right.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense if you look at it too hard.
Right.
Anyways, Will Smith was in 1 episode of The Walking Dead, 1 episode of Revolution. We have Paul Chaplin, who is listed as Big Jim's Army, which doesn't happen in this episode, but we're going to see him again in episode 6, which I guess is where that comes up. He was in The Devil's Hand and Tammy. We have Robert Gregory Cole as a townsperson. This is the only time we're going to see him. He was in 9 episodes of Revolution, 1 episode of Secrets and Lies. We have a kid drawing the dome, and I think I missed that. Somewhere in this episode there was a kid drawing the dome. This is the only episode we see him in, played by Nicholas Ferrier. He was in 1 episode of Mercy Street.
Okay.
I've got more.
Oh, okay.
And the rest of these are all only 1 episode appearances. So we never see any of them again, at least according to IMDb. They're probably there somewhere, but,
just not credited in any
not
kind of way.
Listed. Because, again, uncredited listings this is not fully inclusive at all, but this is just what has made its way to IMDb for one reason or another. But they are all basically credited as different variations of resident, town person, town folk. Very inconsistent naming of them as well. We have Carolyn Foland. She was in 3 episodes of Sleepy Hollow, 1 episode of Secrets and Lies. We have Anya Johnson, who was in 2 episodes of Vice Principals. Griffin O'Connor, who was in 1 episode of The Walking Dead and White House Down. We have Philip Odongo, who was in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. We have Jim Templar, who was the production assistant on The Boys, Stranger Things, and Ravenswood.
So he's been busy.
And as far as acting, he has a credit on an episode of Lost and a credit on Star Trek Enterprise.
Oh, okay.
And then we have, this is an uncredited listing, but they have a character name. So I was expecting to be able to figure out who the heck they were, and I didn't. They're listed as the character Jeter Brother.
Okay.
So I don't know if Brother's the last name or they're one of the Jeter brothers, but I didn't hear that name anywhere in the episode.
Jeter Brothers. Is that the pair of brothers that...
Well, no, because this is the only episode this person's in, and it's uncredited.
Gotcha.
So I have no idea what that's about. But he's played by Josh Turner, who was in 21 episodes of The Walking Dead.
Oh, okay.
He was one of the one of Negan's people, the Saviors. And then we have Melissa Veal, who was in 2 episodes of Revolution. And then we have Teen Girl, played by Megan D. Westbrook, and she was in a movie called The Longest Ride.
All right. Good stuff.
So, yeah, lots of background actors. And again, there's more, but those are the ones that are listed on IMDb.
Gotcha. All right.
Including a few that we're going to see repeatedly throughout the season. But a lot of them are one-offs, so... I don't know. They do their thing.
Yeah.
I imagine it's hard, to get the same people over and over since they're not in any kind of contract.
Yeah.
I think just the nature of being uncredited makes it hard for them to have consistency, I would guess.
Yeah, I would assume that would be a challenge.
And you know what? I don't even know where Under the Dome was filmed. I'm going to say it's not Nova Scotia, because we'd start to see names we recognize in the background by now.
I think it might have been a Canadian
It might
film
be Vancouver
series.
or
Something like
Toronto.
that. Yeah.
I don't think it's Nova Scotia.
You could definitely look into that.
I will try and remember to look into that for next week, because I think that would be interesting to know, because I don't know. Like we see that a lot, now that we dig so deep into things that we do, is you'll start to know where something was filmed just by the other credits that you see repeated among all of the background and the one-off under 5 actors.
Mm-hmm. All right, so do we have anything else to say before concluding?
That's all I have for this one. Again, I enjoyed the episode. I feel like for the most part, it's going in the right direction so far.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's a good episode. It has its flaws. There's not a series that doesn't. There's not a movie that doesn't have flaws. But it's definitely, season 1, best season of Under the Dome.
Yeah,
because after that, it goes
I can say
straight.
At this point that I'm starting to, really like some of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting to get invested in their stories and in what's going on with them. It's hard to separate, like, everything we know from what you know at this point, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, as we've talked about, like, Junior goes through some stuff.
Right.
Jim goes through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've got the relationship between Barbie and Julia, right? Which isn't really a thing yet.
Right.
So it's hard not to look at that stuff and put it into your opinions on what's going on now. And to just look at this like, well, let's pretend...
As this episode.
Let's pretend we only know these 2 episodes.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think I enjoy everybody at this point, and I think they did a good job making you want to keep watching and know what's going to happen with all these people.
Absolutely. All right, we'd like to hear from you. What'd you think of this podcast? What'd you think of this episode? Stacie can be reached at.
I've reached on Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this episode, if you like this video and want to support the channel, there are ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join one of my Core Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a copy. You can join the Core Productions membership for 99 cents a month. And all those links are available in my link tree, which is now going to be included on these videos. I'm going to be a little bit more vigilant on that. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video as well as subscribe to the channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Core Productions, signing off.